The crystal chandelier above the dining table cast dancing shadows across the untouched roasted chicken. Victoria Hayes checked her watch for the 5th time in 20 minutes. 8:30. Marcus was late again, and the meal she had spent 2 hours preparing was growing cold. She picked up her wine glass, swirling the deep red liquid as she stared at the empty chair across from her. Their penthouse overlooked the glittering skyline of downtown Seattle, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view that real estate agents called breathtaking. But Victoria had stopped noticing the view months ago. The beauty of their surroundings only seemed to emphasize the emptiness she felt inside these walls. The sound of the front door opening made her sit up straighter. Marcus walked in, his eyes fixed on his phone screen, his other hand loosening the tie around his neck. He moved through the foyer without looking up, heading straight toward his home office. "Marcus," Victoria called out, her voice steady despite the frustration building in her chest. He paused mid-step, finally glancing toward the dining room. His expression showed surprise, as if he had forgotten she existed. "Oh, you're still up." "I made dinner," she said, gesturing toward the elaborate spread on the table. "I texted you 3 hours ago that I was cooking your favorite." Marcus rubbed the back of his neck, that familiar gesture he always made when he was about to make an excuse. "Right, sorry, babe. The Singapore investors needed a last-minute video conference. I grabbed something at the office." He started walking toward the hallway again. "I've got emails to catch up on." Victoria stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. The sound made Marcus stop and turn around, his eyebrows raised in question. "We need to talk," she said quietly. "Can it wait? This deal is critical and—" "No, Marcus, it cannot wait. Nothing can ever wait when it comes to your business, but apparently everything can wait when it comes to us." He sighed, the kind of heavy, irritated sigh that made Victoria feel like a burden. "What is this about? When was the last time we had a real conversation?" Victoria asked, moving closer to him. "When was the last time you asked me about my day or told me about yours? When did we stop being partners and become roommates who occasionally share the same bed?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "I work 70 hours a week to maintain this lifestyle. This penthouse, your car, the vacations, none of it comes free. I thought you understood that." "I never asked for any of this," Victoria said, her voice rising slightly. "I was happy in our small apartment in Capitol Hill. Was happy when we used to cook together on Sunday. Mornings and take walks around Green Lake. I was happy when you used to look at me like I mattered." "You're being dramatic," Marcus said dismissively. "This is how successful marriages work. Both people make sacrifices." "What sacrifices have you made?" Victoria challenged. "I gave up my career in marketing when you said you wanted a wife who could host your business dinners. I walked away from the promotion I had worked 3 years for. I said goodbye to my colleagues, my projects, everything I had built." "What did you give up?" Marcus crossed his arms over his chest, his expression hardening. "I gave up my freedom. I gave up being able to focus entirely on building my company without distractions." The word hit Victoria like a slap. "Distractions? Is that what I am to you?" "You know what I mean," Marcus said, but his tone suggested he meant exactly what he said. Victoria felt something crack inside her chest, like ice breaking under pressure. For 3 years, she had made excuses for his absence, his indifference, his gradual transformation from the warm, attentive man she had married into this cold stranger. She had told herself that once his company stabilized, once the next funding round closed, once the international expansion completed, things would get better. But there was always another goal, another milestone, another reason why their marriage had to wait. "Do you even love me anymore?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus was silent for a long moment. That silence told Victoria everything she needed to know. But he spoke anyway, and his words carved themselves into her memory. "Honestly, Victoria, I think marrying you was a mistake. I got caught up in the romance, the idea of having a partner to build a life with. But the reality is that you want things from me I cannot give. You want attention, time, emotional energy that I need to pour into my business. You're holding me back from my full potential." The room seemed to tilt. Victoria grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself, her knuckles turning white. "You think I'm holding you back?" "Not intentionally. Marcus said, his tone almost clinical. But yes, a CEO needs a wife who understands the demands of building an empire. Someone who doesn't need constant reassurance and quality time. Someone who can be self-sufficient. Someone who doesn't need to be loved, Victoria said bitterly. You want a trophy wife who looks good at your events and doesn't bother you the rest of the time? Marcus shrugged, if that's how you want to phrase it. The casualness of his response broke something fundamental in Victoria. She had spent 3 years trying to be enough, trying to earn his attention, trying to save a marriage that he had already abandoned. She suddenly saw herself clearly, a woman who had made herself smaller and smaller, hoping that if she took up less space, he might finally notice her. Then I'll make this simple, Victoria said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. I'm leaving. For the first time that evening, Marcus looked truly surprised. What? I'm leaving you tonight. She walked toward the hallway, toward their bedroom. Victoria, wait, Marcus called after her, but she did not stop. In their bedroom, she pulled her largest suitcase from the closet and began filling it with clothes. Her hands shook, but she kept moving, kept packing. Marcus appeared in the doorway, watching her with an expression she could not read. You're really doing this? He asked. You just told me I was a mistake, Victoria said without looking at him. Why would I stay? I didn't mean it like that. I was frustrated, tired. You meant every word, Victoria interrupted, finally meeting his eyes. And you know what? You were right about one thing. This marriage was a mistake. But not for the reasons you think. The mistake was me believing that if I loved you hard enough, you would eventually love me back. She zipped the suitcase closed and grabbed her purse from the dresser. As she passed Marcus in the doorway, he reached for her arm. Where will you go? He asked. Victoria pulled away from his touch. Anywhere that I'm not someone's distraction. She walked out of the bedroom, down the hallway, past the cold dinner still sitting on the table. At the front door, she paused and turned back one last time. Marcus stood in the middle of their living room, looking smaller somehow in the vast space. I hope your empire keeps you warm at night, Victoria said softly, because I'm done sacrificing myself for your success. She opened the door and stepped into the hallway, pulling the door closed behind her. The click of the lock echoed in the silence. Victoria stood there for a moment, her heart pounding, tears streaming down her face. Then she pulled out her phone and called the only person she knew would understand. Jennifer. It's me, Victoria said when her best friend answered. Can I come over? I just left Marcus. Oh, honey, of course, Jennifer replied immediately. Come straight here. I'll put fresh sheets on the guest bed. As Victoria rode the elevator down to the parking garage, she felt the weight of 3 years lifting from her shoulders. The life she was leaving behind looked perfect from the outside, but it had been slowly suffocating her. Whatever came next would be uncertain, frightening, and completely unknown. But it would be hers. And for the first time in 3 years, Victoria Hayes felt like she could finally breathe. Victoria woke to the smell of fresh coffee and vanilla pancakes. For a disorienting moment, she forgot where she was, expecting to see the sterile white ceiling of the penthouse bedroom. Instead, she found herself on Jennifer's overstuffed couch, wrapped in a handmade quilt, sunlight streaming through lace curtains. Good morning. Sunshine, Jennifer called from the kitchen of her cozy apartment above her cafe. I made your favorite, blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup. Victoria sat up slowly, her body aching from the emotional exhaustion of the previous night. She had cried for hours in Jennifer's arms, releasing 3 years of suppressed pain and disappointment. Her best friend had simply held her, offering tissues and reassurance until Victoria finally fell asleep around 3 in the morning. Jennifer appeared in the doorway carrying a tray with breakfast and coffee. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she wore her favorite sweatshirt that said, "Life is brutal." Despite running her own business and being up early every morning, Jennifer always managed to radiate warmth and energy. How are you feeling? Jennifer asked gently, setting the tray on the coffee table. Like my entire life just imploded, Victoria admitted, wrapping the quilt tighter around her shoulders. But also strangely relieved. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Jennifer said, settling into the armchair across from her. You've been carrying that dead marriage on your back for years. Of course you feel lighter now that you've put it down. Victoria picked at her pancakes, surprised to find that despite everything, she was actually hungry. I don't know what to do next, Jen. I have some savings, but not much. I gave up my career. I don't even know if anyone in the marketing world remembers who I am. Then we remind them, Jennifer said firmly. Victoria, you were brilliant at your job. You increased client engagement by 40% at your last agency. You created campaigns that won awards. That talent didn't disappear just because Marcus convinced you to put it on hold. That was 3 years ago. The industry moves fast. So do you, Jennifer countered. Look, you can stay here as long as you need. The couch is yours, and I mean that. But I also know you. And I know you're not going to be content sitting around feeling sorry for yourself for long. Victoria managed a small smile. Jennifer knew her better than anyone, even better than Marcus ever had. They had met in college, bonded over a shared marketing class project, and remained inseparable ever since. When Jennifer decided to leave corporate life to open her cafe 3 years ago, Victoria had been her biggest cheerleader. Now Jennifer was returning the favor. Over the next few days, Victoria moved through her grief in waves. Some moments she felt strong and determined. Others she found herself crying over silly things like a song on the radio or a couple holding hands on the street. Jennifer gave her space when she needed it, and distraction when she was drowning. On the 5th day, Jennifer sat down across from Victoria at the cafe's corner table with a determined expression. The morning rush had ended, and only a few customers remained, typing on laptops or reading books. Okay, enough wallowing, Jennifer announced, sliding a laptop across the table. It's time to rebuild Victoria Hayes. Jen, I'm not ready. You're absolutely ready. You're just scared, which is normal. But fear is not going to pay your bills or give you back your sense of purpose. Jennifer opened the laptop to a blank document. We're going to update your resume, refresh your portfolio, and start reaching out to your old contacts. Today. Victoria stared at the blank screen, feeling overwhelmed. What if nobody wants to hire me? What if I've lost my edge? Then we find out together, Jennifer said. But I don't believe that for a second. You know why? Because last week you looked at my cafe and within 5 minutes told me 3 ways I could improve customer flow and increase my social media engagement. You can't help being brilliant, Victoria. It's who you are. Something shifted in Victoria's chest. Jennifer was right. She had been so focused on what she had lost that she had forgotten what she still possessed. Her skills, her creativity, her strategic mind. They spent the next 6 hours rebuilding Victoria's professional presence. They created a sleek portfolio website showcasing her past work, updated her LinkedIn profile, and drafted personalized messages to her former colleagues and industry contacts. Jennifer insisted on taking new professional photos of Victoria in the cafe's best lighting. You need to look like the powerhouse you are, Jennifer said, adjusting Victoria's blazer. Not like someone's forgotten housewife. The words stung a little, but Victoria knew they were true. She had let herself become invisible in Marcus's shadow. It was time to step back into the light. The responses started coming within days. Former colleagues reached out with congratulations on taking time to explore new opportunities, the professional euphemism for what had actually been a career sacrifice. Several mentioned knowing of freelance projects or contract positions that might interest her. Victoria's first real opportunity came from an unexpected source. Robert Mitchell, owner of the Impressions Gallery downtown, reached out through LinkedIn. He was planning a major exhibition launch and needed help with the marketing campaign and event planning. I remember your work from the Taylor account, his message read. That product launch event was the talk of the industry. If you're available, I'd love to discuss a collaboration. Victoria's hands trembled as she typed her response. This was real. Someone remembered her work and valued it enough to reach out. They met at the gallery the following Tuesday. Robert was a distinguished man in his late 50s with silver hair and an infectious enthusiasm for art. He walked Victoria through the gallery space, explaining his vision for the exhibition, a showcase of emerging Pacific Northwest artists that he hoped would put his gallery on the regional map. I need someone who can create buzz, Robert explained, gesturing toward the empty walls that would soon hold paintings and sculptures. Someone who understands how to tell a story that makes people care. Your work always had that emotional resonance. Victoria felt her confidence growing as they discussed ideas. Her mind, dormant for so long, suddenly sparked with possibilities. She suggested a multi-platform campaign that would include social media teasers featuring the artist's stories, partnerships with local influencers, a VIP preview night, and an interactive opening event that would make attendees feel like participants rather than observers. I love it, Robert said, his eyes lighting up. When can you start? Victoria named a fair rate for her services, half expecting him to balk. Instead, Robert extended his hand immediately. You got yourself a deal. I'll have my lawyer draw up a contract. As Victoria left the gallery that afternoon, she felt something she had not experienced in years. Pride. Not pride in someone else's accomplishments, but pride in her own abilities. She pulled out her phone and called Jennifer. I got the job, Victoria practically shouted when her friend answered. Jennifer's squeal of excitement was so loud that Victoria had to hold the phone away from her ear. I knew it. I'm closing early. We're celebrating tonight. Victoria threw herself into the gallery project with fierce determination. She woke early each morning, working from Jennifer's cafe until the space opened, then moving to various coffee shops or the library. She reached out to her old network, reconnecting with photographers, designers, and writers who could help bring her vision to life. The artists themselves became her greatest inspiration. She interviewed each one, learning their stories, their struggles, their dreams. Many were like her, people who had put their passions on hold for practical concerns or other people's expectations, only to find their way back to what made them feel alive. One artist, a woman named Teresa, who had returned to painting after 20 years raising children, told Victoria, "The art was always inside me. I just had to remember that I deserved to let it out." Those words resonated deeply. Victoria had buried her own talents and ambitions, convinced that being a supportive wife meant making herself smaller. Now she was learning that she could be expansive, creative, and successful on her own terms. The exhibition launch exceeded everyone's expectations. The gallery was packed with art enthusiasts, collectors, and media representatives. Victoria's campaign had created genuine excitement, and the event itself felt more like a celebration than a stuffy gallery opening. Local news covered it, and several pieces sold that first night. Robert found Victoria near the end of the evening, his face flushed with happiness. "You did it," he said, shaking her hand vigorously. "This is the most successful opening I've ever had. I'm getting calls from artists who want to be featured next. Would you be interested in doing this again?" "Absolutely," Victoria said without hesitation. As she walked home to Jennifer's apartment that night, she had started thinking of it as home. Victoria realized how much had changed in just 6 weeks. She had gone from feeling worthless and invisible to feeling capable and valued. She was not just surviving without Marcus. She was thriving. Jennifer was waiting up when Victoria arrived, 2 glasses of wine already poured. "Tell me everything!" They stayed up late talking about the event, the connections Victoria had made, and the possibilities opening up before her. As midnight approached, Jennifer raised her glass in a toast. "To Victoria Hayes," she said warmly, who was never actually broken, just temporarily convinced she was. Victoria clinched her glass against Jennifer's, tears of gratitude stinging her eyes. "To second chances." "To first chances of being truly yourself," Jennifer corrected with a smile. That night, lying on the couch that had become her temporary bed, Victoria thought about Marcus for the first time in days. She wondered if he had noticed her absence beyond the practical inconvenience. She wondered if he regretted his words. Then she realized something profound. It did not matter anymore. His opinion of her, his regret or lack thereof, his entire existence had stopped being the center of her universe. She had found something better than Marcus's approval. She had found her own. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered to the cafe where Victoria had become a permanent fixture at the corner table. Jennifer set the heavy cream envelope next to Victoria's laptop with a knowing smile. "Someone's moving up in the world," Jennifer teased. Victoria opened the envelope carefully, pulling out an embossed invitation to the Cascade Children's Foundation annual charity gala. Robert had mentioned putting her name on the list as thanks for the gallery's success, but seeing the formal invitation made it feel real. The event was known for attracting Seattle's most influential philanthropists, business leaders, and artists. "It's in 2 weeks," Victoria said, studying the details. "I don't even know if I have anything appropriate to wear." "Then we're going shopping," Jennifer declared. "And before you protest about money, consider it an investment. These events are where real connections happen." The following Saturday, they spent the afternoon searching through boutiques until Victoria found the perfect dress, a deep emerald silk that brought out the green flecks in her hazel eyes. It was elegant without being ostentatious, the kind of dress that made her feel confident and beautiful. The night of the gala, Victoria stood in front of Jennifer's full-length mirror, barely recognizing herself. The past 3 months had changed her. She had lost the tension she used to carry in her shoulders, and her eyes had regained a sparkle that had dimmed during her marriage. "You look stunning," Jennifer said, helping Victoria with her necklace. "Now go out there and remind Seattle why Victoria Hayes is a force to be reckoned with." The gala was held at the Columbia Tower Club, with panoramic views of the city and Puget Sound. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over elegantly dressed guests, mingling with champagne glasses. Victoria felt a flutter of nerves as she entered, but she lifted her chin and walked in with purpose. Robert spotted her immediately and waved her over to his group. He introduced her to several gallery owners and potential clients, and Victoria found herself easily falling into conversation about art, marketing trends, and the city's growing creative scene. She was examining the silent auction. Items, a weekend getaway to the San Juan Islands, had caught her eye, when a voice spoke from behind her. "That's a good choice. The sunsets from that particular house are spectacular." Victoria turned to find a tall man with warm hazel eyes and an easy smile. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, but there was nothing stuffy about his demeanor. He had the kind of face that looked like it smiled often, laugh lines around his eyes, and a genuine openness in his expression. "You've been there?" Victoria asked. "I designed it," he said, extending his hand. "James Sullivan. I'm an architect." "Victoria Hayes. Marketing and event planning." She shook his hand, noticing the way his smile reached his eyes. "You designed the Morrison residence on Lopez Island?" "I've seen photos in Architectural Digest. It's beautiful." James looked pleased. "You follow architecture?" "I appreciate good design in all its forms. The way you incorporated the natural landscape into the structure, it felt like the house grew there organically rather than being imposed on the land." "That's exactly what I was trying to achieve," James said, his interest clearly piqued. "Most people just comment on the view or the square footage. It's refreshing to talk to someone who sees the intentionality behind the choices." They moved away from the auction table, continuing their conversation. Victoria learned that James had started his own firm 5 years ago, focusing on sustainable residential design that honored the Pacific Northwest's natural beauty. He listened intently as she described her recent work with the gallery, asking thoughtful questions about how she created emotional connections between audiences and art. "It's similar to architecture in a way," James mused. "We're both trying to create experiences that make people feel something. A building should tell a story just like a marketing campaign." "Exactly," Victoria said, surprised by how easily they understood each other. Space and narrative, they're not that different when you think about it. The dinner bell rang, summoning guests to their assigned tables. Victoria was disappointed to end the conversation, but James surprised her by checking his place card. "Table 12, he said. "You?" Victoria checked her own card. "Table 12, his smile widened. "Well, looks like we'll be continuing this conversation over dinner." They were seated next to each other at a table with 6 other guests, including a tech entrepreneur, a nonprofit director, and 2 doctors. The conversation flowed naturally, touching on everything from sustainable development to the city's housing crisis. Victoria found herself impressed by James's thoughtfulness. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did contribute, his comments showed genuine consideration for multiple perspectives. So Victoria, the tech entrepreneur, a woman named Patricia, asked during dessert, "Robert mentioned you recently returned to the marketing world. What prompted the comeback?" Victoria felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever her past threatened to intrude on her present. But she had learned over the past months that her story was nothing to be ashamed of. "I took time away from my career when I got married," Victoria said evenly. "It seemed like the right choice at the time, but I eventually realized I needed to reclaim that part of myself. Sometimes the best thing you can do is start over." "That takes courage," James said quietly, his tone warm with understanding rather than pity. "Or desperation," Victoria said with a self-deprecating laugh. "Courage often looks like desperation from the inside," he replied. "But from the outside it looks like strength." Their eyes met, and Victoria felt something shift in the air between them. It was not quite attraction, not yet, but recognition. The acknowledgement that here was someone who might understand the complicated path she had walked. After dinner, guests mingled again, and James stayed by Victoria's side as they moved through the crowd. They discovered shared interests in hiking, independent coffee shops, and a mutual love of mystery novels. James had a self-deprecating sense of humor that made Victoria laugh genuinely for the first time in what felt like forever. "I should probably confess something," James said as they stood by the windows overlooking the city lights. "I noticed you when you first arrived tonight. I was trying to work up the nerve to introduce myself when you coincidentally stopped at the auction item I had donated." Victoria felt her cheeks warm. "Coincidentally? I may have strategically positioned myself nearby," he admitted with a grin. "Is that terribly forward?" "It's honest," Victoria said. "I appreciate honest." They exchanged business cards, a professional gesture that felt like something more. James walked her to the valet station at the end of the evening, and as they waited for her car, he seemed to hesitate before speaking. "I know this might be presumptuous, but would you be interested in getting coffee sometime? I have a project coming up that could actually use someone with your expertise, but I'd also just enjoy continuing our conversation." Victoria felt a flutter of nervousness mixed with excitement. "I'd like that. Professional or personal?" James asked, his eyes twinkling. "Why not both?" Victoria replied, surprising herself with her boldness. They met for coffee 3 days later at a small roaster in Fremont. What was supposed to be a 1-hour meeting turned into 4 hours of easy conversation. James told her about his vision for a community development project, affordable housing designed with the same care and attention usually reserved for luxury properties. Everyone deserves to live in a space that makes them feel human, James explained passionately. Good design shouldn't be a luxury. It should be a right. Victoria found herself drawn to his idealism, so different from Marcus's cutthroat business philosophy. James wanted to build things that mattered, that improved people's lives. He asked about Victoria's dreams, too, really listening when she admitted she had started thinking about starting her own marketing consultancy, specializing in arts and nonprofits. "You should do it," James encouraged. "The world needs people who care about elevating meaningful work, not just maximizing profits." Their professional coffee meetings became a regular occurrence, usually stretching well beyond their scheduled time. James introduced Victoria to several nonprofit directors who needed marketing help, and she connected him with potential clients in the arts community. But more than the professional networking, they were building a genuine friendship. Jennifer noticed the change in Victoria immediately. "You've been smiling at your phone," she observed one morning at the cafe. "That's new?" "James just sent me a link to an article about biomimicry in architecture," Victoria said, trying to sound casual. "Uh-huh. And that makes you smile like that?" "It's interesting." "Victoria Hayes, you are falling for this man." Victoria opened her mouth to deny it, then stopped. Was she? The realization hit her like a wave. She looked forward to James's messages. She found excuses to extend their meetings. She caught herself wondering what he would think about things throughout her day. "I don't know if I'm ready," Victoria admitted quietly. "It's only been 4 months since I left Marcus." There's no timeline for healing, Jennifer said gently. But there's also no rule that says you have to be completely healed before you allow good things into your life. James makes you happy. That's allowed. That weekend, James invited Victoria to tour one of his completed projects, a community center in Ballard that incorporated art spaces, meeting rooms, and a public garden. As they walked through the thoughtfully designed spaces, James explaining his choices and the community's involvement in the design process, Victoria felt her admiration for him deepen. They ended up in the rooftop garden as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. James was pointing out the native plants they had chosen when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression changed subtly. "Everything okay?" Victoria asked. "Just a client message. Can I be honest about something?" James turned to face her fully. "That wasn't actually a client. It was my sister asking if I was ever going to admit that these professional meetings have become something more for me." Victoria's heart began to race. "And have they?" "Yes," James said simply. "I know your situation is complicated. I know you're rebuilding your life, and maybe the last thing you need is someone adding pressure. But I'd regret not telling you that I've developed feelings for you, Victoria. Real feelings. The kind that make me want to know everything about you. That make me check my phone hoping for your messages. That make me think about you when I should be focused on blueprints." Victoria felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were not sad tears. "I'm scared," she admitted. "My marriage broke me in ways I'm still discovering. I don't know if I trust my own judgment anymore." "Then don't trust your judgment," James said gently. "Trust what you feel. And if what you feel is that you'd like to explore this connection between us, we can take it as slowly as you need. If what you feel is that you're not ready, I'll respect that completely and hope we can remain friends." Victoria looked out at the city skyline, then back at James's open, hopeful face. For months, she had been focused on rebuilding her career and her independence. She had convinced herself that romance was something she had to avoid, that needing someone made her weak. But standing here with James, she realized that was Marcus's voice in her head, not her own truth. "I'd like to explore this," Victoria said softly. Slowly, James's smile was radiant. "Slowly is perfect." He reached for her hand tentatively, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, Victoria laced her fingers through his. They stood like that as the sun continued its descent, two people who had found each other in the midst of rebuilding their separate worlds, discovering that maybe they could build something new together. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from the street below, Marcus, who had heard through mutual acquaintances about Victoria's success and had come looking for her, only to find her happy in a way she had never been with him. The real test was just beginning.